In just 13 days, the Middle East has crossed a dangerous red line round. The clock U.S. airstrikes have crippled Iran's maritime lifeline. Both sides have stopped targeting only military forces and are now deliberately bombing water plants, power stations, and civilian road bridges. A hidden war powerful enough to trigger a global oil surge and drag down the world economy is spiraling out of control. Most people only see scattered news of firefights, unaware that this all-out confrontation between the U.S. and Iran has evolved from regional military skirmishes into a decisive game that reshapes global energy and economic patterns. In late July 2025, the United States fully launched its comprehensive logistics siege strategy against Iran, marking a fundamental shift in its operational tactics. Abandoning previous tactical strikes limited to military strongholds, the U.S. has expanded its core targets to Iran's critical civilian infrastructure covering transportation, energy, and water supply. By paralyzing these essential facilities, the U.S. aims to suppress Iran strategically, trapping the country in a dual crisis of impaired military mobility and collapsing civilian livelihoods. Since the conflict flared up in early July, the U.S. military has launched high-frequency night airstrikes on Iranian territory for 11 consecutive nights, as of the 22nd of July, hitting a new high in operational intensity and coverage in the recent U.S. Iran standoff. Samir Ragheb, a senior Egyptian military and strategic analyst, points out that the U.S. has concentrated airstrikes on strategic bridges, leading to Iran's Abbas port represent the most critical strategic turning point of this conflict. This move officially signals that the U.S. is no longer satisfied with gaining tactical advantages through sporadic airstrikes, but has initiated a long-term systematic strategic attrition campaign against Iran. Those familiar with Iran's geopolitics know that southern Iran features fragmented mountains and plains, making its land transportation heavily reliant on cross-regional bridge networks. Seemingly ordinary traffic facilities, these bridges actually serve as the core lifeline connecting military and civilian material supplies. As the core gateway of southern Iran, Abbas Port links the two inland cities of Lar and Shiraz. The bridge network connecting the three areas forms the pivotal channel for military deployment in southern Iran. The U.S.'s targeted bridge bombings serve clear tactical purposes: to completely block the north-south transportation of Iran's heavy military equipment, cut off the delivery of reinforcement troops and ammunition to frontline positions in the Strait of Hormuz, and fundamentally weaken Iran's military deployment capabilities in the Strait region. Official reports from Hormuz province confirm that continuous airstrikes have destroyed 6 key bridges in the province, cutting off major highways connecting the provincial capital Abbas port and paralyzing regional land transportation. Meanwhile, 116 communication towers have been severely damaged, causing total communication blackouts in multiple towns and remote areas, disrupting both military command communications and civilian daily networks. Mark Hilborn, a senior lecturer in security studies at King's College London with in-depth research on Middle East geopolitical warfare, has decoded the underlying logic of the U.S.'s bridge. Bombing tactic, he explains that military games over the Strait of Hormuz are essentially contests of logistical support. Southern Iran's bridge network underpins the region's coastal defense and maritime combat capabilities. Most of Iran's coastal defense missiles, drone units, and coastal surveillance equipment deployed along the Strait of Hormuz rely on these bridges for deployment, rotation, and resupply. By destroying bridge infrastructure, the U.S. is not merely conducting physical damage, but stripping Iran of its military control over the Strait of Hormuz and curbing its maritime deterrence through severed logistical links, paving the way for subsequent maritime blockades and military pressure. As the U.S. gains gradual battlefield advantages, the Trump administration has drastically escalated its deterrence. On the 22nd of July, Trump issued a stern social media threat, announcing a new set of rules for U.S. strikes on Iran. Every time Iran fires on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. military will bomb and destroy one Iranian bridge or power plant. Strike targets are no longer restricted to southern border areas, but extend to core civilian and infrastructure facilities in and around Tehran. It is evident that Washington's current strategy goes beyond conventional military strikes. Adopting a sustained attrition and precision bleeding tactic, the U.S. is wearing down Iran's military defense capabilities and civilian operational foundations through nonstop strikes on air defense systems, command and control networks, transportation, and energy infrastructure, forcing Iran into concessions. While bridge infrastructure bears heavy attacks, the U.S.'s multidimensional coordinated strike system has been fully deployed, prioritizing key hubs including ports, airports, and railway stations to achieve full-spectrum suppression. As early as the 16th of July, the U.S. launched synchronized multi-target airstrikes on airports, strategic bridges, and railway stations across southern Iran, killing at least 2 civilians and damaging massive infrastructure. As tensions escalated, airstrikes spread nationwide. On the 24th of July, multiple Iranian regions came under large-scale air attacks, prompting Tehran to activate its full-range air defense system to intercept incoming missiles and fighter jets. Iran's core port cities suffered the brunt of the assault. Multiple explosions rocked Abbas port, where local officials confirmed 2 civilian injuries, widespread power outages, and damaged urban power systems. Additional blasts were reported in southern Qashm Island, the outskirts of Avaz, and the cities of Jask, Horabad, Hendadeh, and Andameshk, leaving Iran under multi-point saturation attack. U.S. Central Command later released operational details. The U.S. launched a new round of large-scale strikes at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time on the 23rd, lasting 2 hours and 15 minutes. This marked the 13th consecutive night of U.S. airstrikes on Iran, whose defense rhythm was completely disrupted by non-stop high-intensity attacks. The U.S. strikes are highly targeted, focusing on Iran's military command hubs, drone storage facilities, military communication networks, and coastal surveillance stations to fully paralyze Iran's offshore reconnaissance, command, and counterattack capabilities. Middle Eastern media outlet Al Jazeera analyzed that the U.S.'s infrastructure strikes aim to sever southern Iran's internal and external connectivity and ultimately isolate Abbas port. Possessing irreplaceable strategic value, Abbas port serves as the main garrison for the Iranian Navy and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, dominating the throat of the Strait of Hormuz. As Iran's largest and highest throughput commercial port, it handles most of Iran's foreign trade and energy exports, boasting top-tier military strategic significance and economic lifeline status. Controlling Abbas port means seizing the initiative in the geopolitical game over the Strait of Hormuz. Beyond land-air suppression, the U.S. has fully resumed its maritime blockade, completely locking down Iran's maritime trade channels and bringing unprecedented pressure on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. On the 13th of July, U.S. Central Command officially announced that its maritime forces would fully resume blockade and control of shipping, entering and exiting Iranian ports from 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the 14th of July, 11:30 p.m. Iran local time. The U.S. clarified that only compliant merchant ships abiding by the blockade order are allowed to navigate in the waters, while all vessels traveling to and from Iranian ports face interception, inspection, and seizure, with force to be used against non-compliant ships. This maritime blockade is no temporary measure, but an inevitable outcome of the third round of escalating Iran military conflicts. Lee Zixon, assistant researcher at the China Institute of International Studies, analyzes that the previous U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding had long become a dead letter once the current conflict broke out. Unlike previous military retaliations, all U.S. operations in this round constitute a systematic asymmetric strike layout designed to gradually erode Iran's military intervention and deterrence capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz and reshape the strait's control pattern. Trump has also publicly stated that the memorandum constraining bilateral conflicts is completely terminated from the U.S. perspective, and Washington will no longer be bound by the agreement. TOSI's public opinion and legal initiative. U.S. Central Command has repeatedly refuted Iran's claim that the Strait of Hormuz is fully closed, emphasizing that the international shipping lane remains open with U.S. military protection for compliant merchant vessels. However, real market data tells a different story. Since the full escalation of Iran tensions on the 6th of July, shipping volume in the Strait of Hormuz has plummeted. By the 20th of July, only 9 vessels passed through the strait daily, returning to the single-digit low seen during the March 2025 tensions. Compared with the average daily throughput of 118 vessels in 2025, current shipping volume has dropped by over 90%, paralyzing nearly half of the global energy shipping corridor and triggering violent fluctuations in international energy markets. Rather than passively enduring a suppression, Iran has launched large-scale, high-intensity retaliatory strikes, expanding its targets from U.S. military facilities to civilian infrastructure in hosting countries, highlighting the tit-for-tat nature of the conflict. On the 24th of July, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued an official combat statement, announcing a new round of large-scale retaliatory attacks on U.S. military bases and assets in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. Iran achieved remarkable results in this counterattack. It completely destroyed a large U.S. military ammunition depot at Kuwait's Ali al-Salem Air Base and 3 ammunition and equipment storage sites at Kuwait's Udari camp. Strikes on the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain destroyed a core observation tower, causing severe paralysis of the base's security system and massive facility losses. In addition, the Aerospace Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched devastating airstrikes on Jordan's Azraq Air Base, severely damaging multiple U.S. military aircraft and rendering them inoperable in the short term. According to follow-up reports from CBS News, dozens of intensive attacks on U.S. military bases across the Middle East launched by Iran since the 7th of July have left nearly 100 U.S. military personnel injured to varying degrees. Prior to this, U.S. Central Command confirmed on the 18th of July that 2 U.S. soldiers were killed, and several others went missing in Iranian missile and drone attacks in Jordan on the 17th of July, raising the U.S. military death toll in the conflict to 16, which has since climbed to 17 dead and over 430 injured. Anonymous U.S. military officials admitted that Iran's continuous counterattacks prove it still maintains sufficient missile stockpiles. With technological upgrades, Iran's missiles now boast stronger penetration capabilities that can effectively break through the U.S.'s multi-layer air defense interception systems, weakening America's traditional air defense advantages. Meanwhile, the Iranian army has escalated counterattacks with saturation drone strikes on key U.S. military outposts in Jordan and Bahrain to continuously deplete its overseas deployment forces. The most dangerous escalation of the U.S.-Iran conflict lies in both sides breaking through the bottom line of military confrontation and targeting civilian lifeline infrastructure. Water desalination plants, thermal power stations, and water and power supply networks, facilities critical to civilian survival, have been reduced to geopolitical tools, rapidly turning the regional military conflict into a humanitarian disaster. On the 18th of July, the U.S. launched precision airstrikes on Iranian civilian facilities in Hormuz province, completely destroying a core water desalination plant and cutting off drinking water supplies for approximately 10,000 residents across 20 surrounding villages. On the same day, the Bangi water desalination plant near Jask was destroyed, and another water supply facility on Kushum Island was damaged, pushing the civilian livelihood security system in southern Iran to the brink of collapse. Adhering to the tit-for-tat counterattack principle, Iran immediately retaliated against civilian infrastructure in US-allied Gulf countries. As the closest Gulf nation to Iran with dense U.S. military deployments, Kuwait became the primary target of Iran's counterstrikes. Kuwait's Ministry of Electricity, Water, and Renewable Energy stated in an official announcement on the 21st of July that multiple power and water desalination plants in the country had come under Iranian drone and missile attacks for 4 consecutive days, causing widespread fires, facility paralysis, and massive disruptions to water and power supplies. Previously, Kuwait confirmed that a key integrated power and desalination plant was attacked and set on fire for 2 straight days, shutting down multiple main generator units and widening domestic water and power shortages. Many people fail to grasp why desalination facilities are regarded as the lifeblood of Gulf nations, characterized by arid climates, scarce rainfall, and extreme shortages of surface freshwater resources. Kuwait relies on seawater desalination for over 90% of its domestic and industrial water supply. Bahrain, Qatar, and other neighboring countries have even higher desalination water dependency, almost entirely relying on the technology to sustain civilian life. Experts from the French Institute of International Relations explain that Kuwait is Iran's optimal retaliation target due to its geographical proximity to Iran. Located only hundreds of kilometers from Iranian territory, Kuwait can be targeted cost-effectively and accurately by Iran's conventional drones and short-range missiles without sophisticated long-range weaponry. Roxanne Farman-Farmayan, a lecturer in international politics at the University of Cambridge, offers an in-depth geopolitical interpretation. She argues that the U.S.'s preemptive destruction of Iranian civilian water facilities broke long-standing implicit war rules, and Iran's subsequent strikes on identical Kuwaiti civilian facilities serve as a strategic demonstration. By targeting Kuwait's civilian lifelines, Iran sends a clear warning to the U.S. and all U.S. military hosting nations in the Middle East. Iran possesses the capability and resolve to launch reciprocal strikes on allied civilian infrastructure if its own livelihood facilities are destroyed. Iranian Foreign Minister Al-Aghizi publicly reiterated Iran's core defense principle of strict reciprocity. Furthermore, Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Military Headquarters issued an ultimate warning. If the U.S. further escalates strikes and fulfills its threats, Iran will completely block regional oil exports and target all core oil, gas, power, and economic infrastructure across the Middle East, potentially paralyzing the entire regional energy system. As of the 24th of July, the U.S. had conducted 13 consecutive nights of airstrikes on Iran, with conflict intensity, operational scale, and strike coverage hitting record highs and pushing the situation fully out of control. On the 23rd of July, Trump signaled major escalation, stating that he was seriously considering launching large-scale new military operations in Iran on a scale exceeding the previous Epic Fury campaign. In a key operational upgrade, the U.S. deployed B-1 Lancer Street strategic bombers from Britain's Fairford Air Base for the first time in the renewed conflict to strike Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets. According to Fox News, this marks the first B-1 combat mission launched from a European overseas base since the latest round of US. Iran hostilities greatly expanding US strike range and deterrence. As a core U.S. strategic bomber, the B-1 Lancer boasts massive payload and long-range strike capabilities, carrying up to 24 2,000-pound heavy bombs, or dozens of cruise missiles in a single mission, capable of delivering devastating blows to underground hardened bunkers. Large-scale infrastructure and clustered military targets, drawing a clear red line against U.S. strikes launched from foreign bases. Iran declared all overseas military bases used to attack Iran legitimate targets for retaliation. This tough stance triggered spillover tensions in Europe, prompting the UK to place its armed forces on high alert to guard against potential Iranian border counterstrikes. Further crisis signals emerged from reports by the Israel Times, which revealed that the U.S. has notified Israel of plans to escalate strikes in the coming days, including the first use of heavy bombers to target Iran's underground nuclear facilities at Qus Sefid, directly challenging Iran's core strategic bottom line. Meanwhile, U.S. political circles have completely ruled out de-escalation. The U.S. Senate voted down a resolution to halt military operations against Iran by 49, opposed to 47 in favor, clearing the way for continued U.S. military escalation. Faced with the escalating conflict, Secretary General Guterres expressed deep concern, emphasizing that there is no military solution to the dispute and calling for intensified diplomatic efforts. The UN specifically condemned targeted attacks on Iranian civilian infrastructure, including an under-construction nuclear power plant and multiple water desalination facilities, which have triggered severe regional security and humanitarian crises. Despite multiple international mediation efforts to broker a ceasefire, the U.S.-Iran diplomatic deadlock remains unbroken. On the 23rd of July, citing Iranian and Iraqi officials, the New York Times reported that Iran officially rejected a ceasefire proposal delivered by U.S. President Trump via Iraqi Prime Minister. Anonymous diplomatic sources confirmed that Iran has no interest in a temporary deal that shelves the dispute over control of the Strait of Hormuz and refuses to make unconditional ceasefire concessions. Iranian Foreign Minister Al-Aghizi stated bluntly that the core obstacle to de-escalation is not a lack of communication channels, but the U.S.'s illogical, greedy, and domineering negotiating attitude, which attempts to force unilateral concessions from Iran through military pressure and is completely unacceptable to Tehran. Prior to this, multiple Middle Eastern mediators, including Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan, proposed a 10-day temporary ceasefire plan to ease tensions. However, the Trump administration has maintained a contradictory stance, simultaneously studying ceasefire possibilities and making full preparations for all-out war. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Garibabadi confirmed that Iran has completely suspended its obligations under the previous U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding in response to repeated US breaches of commitments. Velayati, senior foreign policy advisor to Iran's supreme leader, warned that Washington's miscalculation of achieving low-cost victory over Iran will trigger far-reaching consequences extending beyond military conflicts to global energy markets and the world economy. Iranian Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf stressed that the security situation of the Strait of Hormuz will never return to pre-war levels, and regional stability can only be restored after the full withdrawal of U.S. military forces. The core contradiction driving the conflict remains unchanged. The U.S. seeks to seize strategic initiative and establish long-term military deterrence through limited sustained strikes, while Iran attempts to constrain its Middle East strategy by manipulating strait shipping controls and global energy market dynamics, making diplomatic compromise fundamentally unattainable. The escalating US-Iran conflict has evolved from a regional military confrontation into a major threat to global energy stability, world economic growth, and Middle Eastern humanitarian conditions. The energy market has responded sharply to the escalating bilateral strikes and Houthi threats to block Saudi shipping routes. On the 21st of July, international oil prices rose by nearly 2%, with Brent crude futures closing at $91.01 per barrel, hitting the highest level since the 10th of June. On the 22nd of July, Brent crude surged to above $95 per barrel intraday, a 6-week high with a single-day gain of nearly 5%. In a latest market analysis released on the 20th of July, Goldman Sachs issued a severe warning. If shipping disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz persist, Brent crude prices could soar above $120 per barrel in the fourth quarter of 2025, triggering a new round of global energy price hikes. As ceasefire hopes fade completely, market expectations for short-term de-escalation have vanished, with geopolitical risk premiums becoming a core pillar of global oil pricing. On the humanitarian front, the conflict has caused staggering casualties and losses. Statistics released by Iran's Ministry of Health on the 23rd of July show that since the U.S. resumed military strikes on the 6th of July, 55 Iranian civilians have been killed and 629 injured, with casualties still rising. Mid-month data recorded 38 deaths and over 400 injuries, including 5 women and 2 minors, leaving countless innocent civilians dead and displaced. The U.S. military has also suffered heavy losses, with 17 troops killed and over 430 wounded in the ongoing Iranian counterattacks. The World Bank warns that escalating Iran tensions could drag global economic growth down to 1.3% in 2025, severely disrupting global economic recovery. Inside Iran, continuous missile strikes on southern and southwestern major cities have trapped local residents in a predicament of relentless airstrikes, extreme heat waves, and frequent power and water outages. Iran's energy ministry has publicly acknowledged severe damage to domestic power infrastructure and called on residents in southern provinces to conserve electricity, marking the near collapse of the country's civilian livelihood support system. This prolonged confrontation is steadily transforming from a regional military conflict into a global economic risk and a devastating humanitarian crisis, whose trajectory will determine the future of global energy security and Middle Eastern peace. What do you think will happen next? Will the U.S. launch a full-scale massive offensive? Can Iran's retaliatory strikes effectively curb US military pressure? Leave your opinions and views in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. I will keep you updated with the latest developments of the U.S.-Iran conflict and break down the geopolitical and global economic ripple effects in real time. See you in the next video.